Thank you for tuning in, America. You're watching Two Dead Guys on a Whiteboard. We have a very special show for you tonight. Two great American 19th century writers, arguably, one for sure. First, we'll bring on the lesser half, Mr. Edgar Allan Poe.
William, thank you for
Edgar, thanks for joining us.
Yes, good to be back.
Yes. How are you feeling?
I'm dead, for one, and I'm sad.
Kind of sounds like your poetry.
I resent that. Would you like a drink?
To be polite, I see you found the bar.
I did, and I've already poured myself one.
Great. Before things get too carried away, I want to dive into the poetry that you actually wrote. Let's talk about The Raven for a second. That non-stop nevermore. Why must the reader suffer through this repetition? What are you trying to say in that?
Well, first of all, yes, it is, one of my better works. I'm very well known for that, and I am very happy that people really caught on to the quality of that work. And the repetition really reflects the speaker's insanity. Really, he's driven mad by losing this person, and it's so important to him. And he might go one way of thinking, another way of thinking, but he always comes back to nevermore. Can't love ever again, nevermore.
Where do you get the influence for these morbid poems?
Well, my life itself was rather sad. I've had a lot of time to reflect, being dead, a lot of time to reflect on how sad my life was. It was very sad. I was born in Boston, which
yeah, nobody wants to come from Boston.
Boston, woo! But excuse me, my father abandoned the family very early on, and then my mother died of consumption, which was obviously quite sad as well. And then I.
But you didn't have it too bad. I mean, you went to the academy. You were somewhat of a scholar.
So my foster father, Mr. Allen, that's where I take my middle name. He was sometimes a great guy. Other times, rest his soul, but a little harder on me than maybe he could have been. And then at the academy, you sometimes you fall in rough times. Maybe you run out of money. Maybe you make a few bad choices gambling, or maybe you have a few too many
things happen.
Exactly, these things happen, and he was never there to pick me up when I fell. Oh,
but don't you believe that you must pick yourself up? I mean, isn't the reader supposed to hope that an Annabelle Lee, these people who are suffering, they'll recover?
That's a great point, but you hope so. But just like in Annabelle Lee, the sea is always there. It's always the sound of the sea, but the side of the sea, and the sadness. It's always there. Sadness is a real human emotion. It's natural. Everyone is going to be sad at some point or another. And just because I'm really keyed into that frequency of being sad doesn't mean you should hate on me for being sad and for being able to express sadness.
But that sadness, weren't you just using that as a tool to sell your poems?
Not at all. Again, it's the chicken and the egg. Just because people agreed with what I had to say doesn't mean I was saying it so they would agree with me.
That's a fair point. But I mean, when you think about your drinking problems, and I mean, you were just throwing out poetry left and right, just to get the ads, right?
It is true that I had lived a fast life. I had some fast times. Maybe I made some mistakes. I mean, I won't be the first to admit that, but maybe I made some mistakes. But
well, before you start repeating yourself and give us another poem that none of us care to read, we're going to bring on the main event, Mr. Upton Sinclair. Upton, thank you for joining us. Please take a seat.
Thank you for having me. Alan, it's good to see you on the other side.
It's Edgar. Like I said, I never actually changed my name to Alan. It's not even my real name. It's a pseudonym.
Okay, Alan.
Respect.
Why don't you take a couple plays off let the big boys talk? Upton, your work, how inspiring. I mean, you created your own path and you changed America. How does it feel looking back on what you've done now?
It's fantastic. After the past, 50 years, something like that, I sparked a revolution. Okay?
This is true.
My literature inspired congressional change, congressional legislation change.
The jungle, without a doubt, got children. out of the factory.
It did, and that's what's most important.
It is. I mean, you changed the lives for millions of immigrants to come. But we'll start with that first immigrant family, those Slovenians. I mean, how hard was it to witness them suffering, and yet you weren't doing anything for them?
I witnessed the suffering of a working man who tried to work his way up the ladder, who fought so hard to make it in the American life as an immigrant. But in the end, he failed, so he had to resort to the real American way of life.
And what is that American way of life? How do you reach corruption?
Corruption.
Is that the only way to reach the top?
In my opinion, yes.
And I think your story brought that to light. Jurgis, I mean, you could only work so hard before America breaks your back.
Jurgis, I don't want to say I exploited his situation, but in so many words, I guess I did. But in all fairness, I did it to better the American way of life, you know.
And you did that. You wrote for a greater cause, unlike, this guy over here.
Who wrote Gothic literature all his life and achieved absolutely nothing but alcoholism.
Save the hot shot sauce for later.
You
I
check
disagree.
that too?
I disagree. So, just because I'm writing fiction, just because maybe the stories I'm taking aren't from the real life, doesn't mean that you can't discredit them, Just because you're using a family that, that's real, doesn't mean that the one that I made it myself. But I made myself. Exactly, I made them.
Edgar, is it true that your stories, they didn't really come from, your experience? You made those up, right?
From the heart, I took them. I took the real, visceral feelings that every person has out there, and I just put them into words that, just because people agree with what I say doesn't mean that. I don't know how to talk to people.
And we don't need to talk to you. Let's talk to this man here. Upton, your work, I mean, enough cannot be said about it. How hard was it to witness these struggles and just hope that your work did what it, did?
It was painful, but I took it as an inspiration. And I made it work. And I made it out to benefit the majority.
Woo! Without a doubt, Upton wrote to better those around him. How does it feel to sit next to a great like this?
He should be honored to be around me. I started literature in America. There was nothing before me, and as far as I'm concerned, there was nothing after me. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how to talk to you. Obviously, maybe as a grandfather to your literature, that you can understand, the difficulties that I faced. The difficulties.
How does that feel, Upton? That's kind of a low blow.
You this little journalist, whatever. I rack muck.
Difficulties of depression?
I rack muck. I rack muck. All I do is rack muck. Oh, look at me racking my muck. Whatever. That's nothing. I went into the depths of human emotion, and you're just like, oh, whatever. He's just talking about the same thing over and over again. But maybe
you went into depth in one human emotion. Yeah. I went into several, and I uplifted and inspired and
several.
Created.
Come on.
And that's the struggle of interviewing two dead guys. You never know when they're going to go. Thanks for tuning in this week. We'll see you next week when I interview Abe Lincoln and Rosa Parks. I'm running the show here.
Let me take a drink.
No. This is mine. What was the question?
Yeah, we'll just focus on the resources you were given. You're kind of a drunk. You're one of the most famous muckraking journalists of all time. Family, though. I mean, how hard was it to watch their struggles, and just witness that suffering?
It really was, and I don't know anything about talking about.